Jing FENG, it's just for our record. Is it okay, or any other participants now? We should get your permission. Is it okay?
Yeah,
Record the seminar. Is it okay?
Yeah, of course, sure.
Yeah, I mean, we will share the recording with you afterwards. Maybe those some parts you may not feel very comfortable. We can modify. We can really revise those parts, and then let's see. Let's see how we process. Okay. Yes, let me introduce Jing FENG. By the way, my name is Seifi. I'll start with myself. Seifi Kenan. I'm a faculty here at Marmara University in the Atatürk School of Education, specializing in philosophy of education, comparative intellectual history, and curriculum and instruction. And so let me introduce our speaker today, Jing FENG. She has been my, actually she had been my teaching assistant.
Yes.
Graduate student in Beijing, in Renmin University of China, in Renmin Daxue.
Yes. Wow, exactly. Yeah.
Daxue is a concept referring to university, comes from the times of Confucius, Daxue. It means great learning. Is that right?
Yes.
Great learning, yes. I don't, you see, I still remember some of the terms in Chinese, although I cannot go since last 2 years. But it's been a wonderful experience for me. That I got a chance to go to China since last 12 years to teach in the summer schools of Renmin University of China. In other words, People's University of China, which was established by Mao Zedong, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes. And she received her BA, bachelor's degree in the Faculty of History.
Yes.
So, right, you received your master's degree in the Chinese historical literature.
Yeah.
And she has done a marvelous job in assisting me during my teaching 2 courses, especially. It was very arduous work, but with the great help of the TA like Jing FENG, things become very easy to do. And then she moved to Cambridge University, where she got full scholarship to pursue her doctoral studies over there in the Faculty of Asian and Middle Eastern Studies. And her supervisor is Professor Imre Galambos. So is that right?
Yeah.
Just one advisor, right?
Yeah, I have another advisor, Royal Sturk, but mainly I work with my supervisor first. Yeah.
You have co-advisor or just one advisor and second advisor?
So in Cambridge, we call the main advisor supervisor. So Imre Galambos is my supervisor, but we have another advisor. Then yeah, it's Professor Dr. Sturk. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So yeah, Cambridge has a different system compared to other. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. So you have 2 advisors?
No, we have only just one advisor or co-advisors.
Okay.
Not necessarily mean first advisor, maybe second advisor, but the division of having a supervisor and an advisor, very peculiar to Cambridge, I think.
Yeah.
Very good. And Jing FENG current research interests are manuscript culture on the Silk Road and the history of reading and books in Chinese thought and literature. And her PhD dissertation examines the production and use of codices discovered in the Dunhuang library cave, which she will talk about today a lot. This is an attempt to shed light on the book culture on the Silk Road. In education and science, there is no boundary in these fields. These are the common grounds for all researchers and all cultures. Regardless of where we come from, we contribute to education and science. In return, we take a lot from education and science. So, Jing FENG pays a very close attention to artisanship of the research as well. I still remember. In the meantime, I'm really struggling playing around with the sunlights. I'm going to hide myself somewhere where I find shadows. But anyhow, this is your turn, Jing FENG. Please go ahead.
All right, so I share the screen. So, okay, so good afternoon. It is my honor to be here to give a talk and thank Professor Kinan for your invitation. And this is my final year in Cambridge, and my research focuses on a group of manuscripts discovered nearby a town called Dunhuang. So then on the screen, I use a map of the Silk Road to show you the location of Dunhuang. So you can see here is the Arabian Peninsula, then Persian, and here is the famous Turfan Basin, and you can see a ring of oasis towns surrounding the desert. Here we have Khotan, Kusha, Turfan, Lowland, and here is the Dunhuang. Actually, can you see the mouse, like the prompt here?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So
yeah, mouse. Yes.
yeah, can you see? You can see it. Okay. So here is Dunhuang. Tens of, like in this region, tens of thousands of items were excavated from all these sites, and in the early 20th century. And if you like, so one of the most notable discovery in Dunhuang was a medieval library cave. More than 14,000 manuscripts, paintings, and printed documents on paper and silk were found in the cave. Today, we usually call these manuscripts Dunhuang manuscripts, and the dates of Dunhuang manuscript range from the 4th century through to the early 11th century, with the largest portion of manuscript coming from the 9th to 10th centuries. The material found in the cave is what I am now working on. So in today's presentation, I will give a brief introduction to the local history and the Dunhuang manuscript, then move on to my PhD project. Afterwards, I will introduce manuscript copied and used by students in medieval Dunhuang. And I will also give you some examples about how students learn based on the secondary scholarship and my own research. And if you are interested in Dunhuang manuscript or the history of Dunhuang, then I recommend 2 books below. So one is a general introduction to Dunhuang studies. Another one is an in-depth studies on the Dunhuang manuscript cultures. So there are 2 characteristics of the regional history of Dunhuang. First of all, in history, Dunhuang was a Buddhist center on the Silk Road. So Buddhism was the most popular religion in Dunhuang. In around the 4th century, it was through Dunhuang that Buddhism spread from the Kushan kingdom to central China. And since then, Buddhism started to flourish in this region. And the major part of the archaeological discoveries in Dunhuang are Buddhist heritages. So secondly, Dunhuang was a transport hub and a center of commerce on the overland Silk Road. People of various ethnicities passed through or settled there, and it was a meeting place of various people and religions. So a large number of Buddhist caves were found in and around the Dunhuang area, revealing astonishing sculptures and murals. The construction of Buddhist caves starts from around the 4th century. The caves were sponsored by patrons such as local ruling elite, foreign visitors, merchants, as well as emperors. The mural painting in caves are teaching tools to inform people about Buddhist beliefs and stories. The most famous group of caves are the Mogao caves. These caves are located in the southeast of Dunhuang. The total number of caves is 735. The mural paintings cover 14,500 square meters, and the caves contains 2,415 statues. And now, thanks to the project, thanks to the project Dunhuang, Digital Dunhuang, we can visit some of the cave virtually. So people from all over the world can enjoy the high definition images and the panoramic tours of 30 caves through this website.
Mm-hmm.
And I am showing you how to. I am showing you some of the pictures I took when I do this online tour. And in this website, you can zoom in and zoom out, adjust the angle and enlarge the images to see the details. You can also find English introduction in this website. So this cave is number 254, constructed in around 4th to 6th century and located on the middle section of the cliff. You can see a statue of a cross-legged Bodhisattva in the middle, and also other Bodhisattvas on the walls. The top section of the 4 walls display heavenly musicians and the Buddha motif. There are totally more than 1,000 Buddhas on the ceiling. The side walls each contain preaching scenes. The middle register of the south and north walls are covered with Jakarta stories and Buddhist life story. And this cave was a family temple sponsored by the couple of Cao Yuanzhong. Sponsored by the couple of Cao Yuanzhong and a local military government in the 10th century. It is one of the largest caves at Mogao, consists of a front chamber, a corridor, and a main chamber. On the 4th slopes, you can see there are like preaching scenes and also Buddha motif. The interesting thing is the interesting thing is you can see tens of donors figures. There are donors figures of the Cao families and the inscription preserved on walls. And this long row of female donors were like wear Uyghur dresses. One of the portrait was a Uyghur princess. So this reflects the Central Asia influences on local population and the culture.
Mm. Do we know the name of the prince, the Uyghur princess?
Here's the inscription, but we cannot see I cannot recognize the name. I'm sorry, but if I get the transcription of this, if I get a transcription of this inscription, then it mentions the name of this princess.
Okay.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, Dunhuang is a multicultural society. In manuscript discovered in Dunhuang, Chinese manuscripts are the most numerous. Tibetan manuscripts follow behind and account for 13 to 14% of the entire corpus. The reason why this region also had a Tibetan manuscript is because Dunhuang fell to Tibetan in 786. So you can see here is the map of the Tang Empire in 669, and Dunhuang is still one part of the Tang Empire. Then in 820, then Dunhuang was deep into the territory of Tibetan Empire. So, so Dunhuang remained under Tibetan's control until the mid-9th century. Then in 840, succession struggles result in the collapse of the Tibetan Empire, and a local warlord called Zhang Yichao led a successful uprising in 848, establishing his rule over this region. So here, and you can see Tibetan Empire is strong. And then now we have Liao empires, and here is the central plant of China. In Dunhuang, like Zhang Yichao, he sent an embassy to the Tang capital and declared the allegiance to the court. And the Tang court appointed him the military commission of the return to allegiance circuit. And in Chinese, we call it Gui Jun. But this name is really ironic because at that time, the Gui Jun circuit is more like a kind of autonomous regime. So like the Zhang Yichao and his subsequent rulers of this region, they ruled as a king. But during this time, even Tibetan did not no longer politically control this region. Tibetan was still in use during this period. Besides Tibetan cultures, Uyghur cultures and the Khotanese culture were also evident in Dunhuang. And on the map, you can see here, you can see like you can see the political other political powers surrounding Dunhuang. And in the mid-9th century, the Uyghur Empire also came to an end. Hundreds of thousands of refugees immigrated southward. So here, the Uyghur Empire, they came to an end, and the refugees moved southward, establishing themselves in several locations. One such area was here, the Xizhou, the Turfan. Another area is here, and the Dunhuang is here. So after a half-century's confrontation and battles between Gui Jun, Dunhuang, and the Uyghurs, they finally established stable diplomatic, trade, and cultural links. Although there was still occasional intensity. Then we also have the Kingdom of Khotan, and also enter into a kind of marriage alliance with Dunhuang. Then, like members of Khotanese royal family visited Dunhuang and commissioned like mural paintings and temple caves around Dunhuang. Manuscript found in the Dunhuang Library also reflects Buddhist influence and the cultural and Central Asia influences. Material recovered from cave cover a wide range of genres. Buddhist manuscripts such as scriptures and prayers make up the bulk of the corpus. The cave also preserved Taoist texts and scripture of Occidental religions, such as Christianity and Manichaeism. The non-religious manuscripts are in much smaller number, which includes Confucian classes, histories, dictionaries, primers, divination manuals, medical treatises, anthologies, poetries, and administrative and economic documents. So in terms of language and scripts, besides Chinese and Tibetan, there are manuscripts in language such as Khotanese, Sogdian, Old Uyghur, Old Turkic, and Sanskrit. Some manuscripts use more than one language or script. We find Sogdian Buddhist texts translated from China, a Book of Omen in runic Turkic, the Uyghur version of Jakarta Stories, a Chinese Khotanese phrasebook, which I will introduce later, a Chinese Sanskrit medical book, as well as a wealth of Tibeto-Chinese bilingual texts. these manuscripts were all found in the cave 17. So we saw like the cave 256 before, then now we come to the cave 16. And this manuscript were all found in cave 17. And this cave is located off the entrance of the cave 16. And on the screen, you can see an old photo taken by Oil Stone in 1907. And you can see manuscript. Here is the cave 1907. Then this is the cave of 1916, which is known as the Dunhuang Library Cave. And you can see manuscript piled up beside the entrance to the library cave. This photo was taken by Orlston in 1907, and he was a Hungarian-born British archaeologist, and he took 24 cases of manuscript and 4 cases of paintings from the cave to London. Currently, this manuscript and painting are at the British Library and the British Museum. In the next photo, so in the next photo, we see now this time we see the French sinologist Paul Pellier, who was examining manuscript inside the library cave. So this photo was taken in 1908, and you can see inside the cave manuscript piled up to the top of the ceiling of the cave. And you can see layers of bundles of scrolls. Pellier took away another large portion of manuscript and paintings, and currently these materials are in the National Library of France and the Gimmick Museum. Later, like Japanese and Russians also came and took some manuscript away and took some manuscript. China government also came and took some small portions of this group. So Dunhuang manuscripts were dispersed to institutions worldwide. Now we can access. Oh, sorry. So now we can access these materials, the digital images of many manuscripts, through the website of the International Dunhuang Project. On the screen, you can see the number of images in IDP, in the International Dunhuang Project database. So just to note, those in Germany are mostly from Turfan, not Dunhuang. Then you can see 2 scrolls here. This is the most popular book form in Dunhuang manuscripts. The scrolls consist of separate sheets of paper glued together at the edges. Most famous are the scrolls of lotus sutures and the diamond suture commissioned by the town court between 671 and 677. I show one of these on the screen. You can see like these scrolls were manufactured and copied in the imperial court, so they have outstanding appearance. They were dyed in yellow-brown color, have regular size and fine texture, and copied by professional scribes. This is then you can see a roller is attached to the end of the scroll, and the roller has 2 ivory knobs. We find a long colophon at the end of the scroll, which contains information about the production of this manuscript. This line is the date of the date of copying this manuscript, followed by a long list of involvers, including the name of the copiers, the name of the bookbinder, the first proofreader, the second proofreader, the third proofreader, and the signatures of supervisors, as well as the amount of paper they used. So we also find many potees. This book form originated in South Asia, consisting of like long rectangular leaves. Each sheet has a hole or 2 holes sometimes. and then a string can pass through the and tie the sheets together. This book from later spread to other regions, including Tibet, Central Asia, and Southeast Asia. And in Southeast Asia, potees are made of dry and smoke-treated palm leaves. And potees from Dunhuang use paper. The majority of potee books from Dunhuang are in Tibetan, and only relatively few are in Chinese. Their appearance in Dunhuang is no doubt linked with the arrival of Tibetans. Then we also have concertina, which is essentially a scroll folded at a regular distance in alternating directions. This form facilitates readings. Basically, you can hold it in your hand and go through content very quickly, much quicker than using a scroll. And I mainly work on codices, which are booklets composed of leaves sewn or glued together. This is the same book form that spread throughout the Western world during the period of late antiquity. The appearance of codex in Dunhuang is related to the spread of Western manuscript cultures. In Dunhuang, we have a very small number of printed material, but we find the earliest violin dated piece of printed in the world. This is a printed scroll. This is a printed scroll of the diamond suture with a colophon stating that this copy was printed in 868. The donor sponsored this copy on behalf of his two parents. On behalf of his two parents, each section of the scroll was printed separately by using a single wood block, and then drawn to the others and form a 5 meter long horizontal scroll. The front piece depicts the Buddha addressing his elderly disciple, surrounded by an assembly gathered around a grove of trees. Then next, I am introducing my PhD project. The title of my PhD dissertation is Producing and Using Codices in 10th Century Dunhuang. So codices in Dunhuang constitute a very special group. We find more than 400 codices and fragments of codices in the cave. This book form has been introduced to Dunhuang since the 8th century, and the appearance of codices, as I said, in Dunhuang is closely related to the cultural context in this region. Most of codices are dated to the 10th century, which indicates that this book form became popular at that time. And this group of manuscripts represent the earliest artifacts of Chinese codices and the early borrowing of Western manuscript culture. They are at the turning point from which the dominant place of scrolls was gradually replaced by folded leaf books in the history of Chinese books. The study of Dunhuang codices can offer a clearer picture of the revolution in the history of books and reveal the relation between the rise of the new book form and the social changes. So what made the residents of Dunhuang in the 9th and 10th century start to use codices? This is one of the key questions that I try to solve in my dissertation. Secondly, most of Dunhuang codices are local products. So they open up opportunities. They open our opportunities for us to approach the lives of residents and the nature of Dunhuang society. Thirdly, studying the Oriental parallel of European codices enable us to reflect on the adaptability of methods of Western manuscript culture studies to Chinese manuscript. This is also an attempt to provide a systematic introduction of Dunhuang codices and will be helpful to those who are interested in comparative manuscript studies. As for the methodology, I see manuscript as material artifacts and focuses on the paleographical and the codicological characteristics. So paleographic is the study of historical writing system and is concerned with forms and process of writing. the dating of manuscript and the cultural context of writing, such as the status or the status of the copiers, the training and the education, the history of scripture. Codicology is the study of manuscripts as physical objects and is concerned with material characteristics of manuscript and techniques used to make books, like writing support, inner structure, binding, illustration, ruling and pricking, etc. The codicological analysis can serve for historical purpose and shed light on the context of production and use of manuscripts. If you are interested in these two fields, there are two books I recommend. Also, there's one of them is specifically on the Islamic codicology on Islamic manuscript. Now I can give you some example to show the importance of looking at the physical forms of manuscript. Here we have a list, have a list of the contents of this manuscript. Then we know in this manuscript we have a series of poems, some Buddhist gathas, and two scriptures, some scribbles. But if we look at the manuscript, we can obtain more information about how this manuscript was produced and used in certain contexts. This manuscript is a very thin codex, only containing 12 pages. We can see only the scripture B was neatly copied and ruled, which means this is the main text, and it is the earliest part of the earliest text in this codex. Text before the scripture B, including scripture A and those poems, were all added later from different hands. This is like you have a notebook and you copy the scripture B. Later, someone comes and find there is still some space at the beginning and the end of the notebook. Then he used the space to write to copy other text for his own sake. So this kind of reuse is very common in Dunhuang manuscript, especially those dated up to the mid-8th century. If it is a scroll, then you can always find later added text on the margins and the versos. If it is a codex, then you can find the additional text on the front covers or the spatial pages at the end. So these later added texts were usually related to students who reuse the space of earlier manuscript to practice characters, words, or sentences they had learned, presumably as a part of their homework. So here I am giving another example related to students who were learning how to write letters, correspondence. So this is a codex containing 70 pages, much thicker than the previous one. The main part of this codex is like a poetic composition of a story about a historical figure, famous historical figure, and the colophon on page 16.1 indicate that it was copied by a bibliographic clerk named Yan Wucheng. And he copied the text in the early fall of 939. Then the text was neatly copied in a quite direct hand, denoting that Yan was really well trained in handwriting. This conforms with his job as a recording official. But this is not the end of the story. Yan did not use up the codex, and after the colophon, there used to be 9 blank pages. 4 years later, in 943, another person named Zhang Tongying somehow obtained this codex and used the blank pages to copy some phrases from the letter models. His handwriting is much more inferior than Yan's handwriting, and we observe frequent corrections and retouching, which demonstrates that this person is unfamiliar with the characters and the phrase used for writing letters. Probably he was a student who just started to learn how to write correspondences. And afterwards, two other inept hands fill the rest of the space. One of them also practiced the letter models. So probably the one who practiced the pattern model was also a student who was learning how to write a letter. So after the true examples, So after true examples, we can see some important characteristics of 10th century Dunhuang manuscript, 9th and 10th century Dunhuang manuscript. We see lots of them were contributed by different individuals, and they were not one-off product, but has been used and reused, grown and evolved for decades, or even for centuries. The later added texts are usually related to students who reuse the space to practice the learning materials. As a part of their homework. The subsequent Smithsonian appearance evidences the difference between manuscript and printed books. In printing industry, producers are in the central position in deciding the form and the content. Books has been finalized and allowed for no further change when they arrive at reader's hand. Readers can never add another printed text or paragraph to the readily printed books. In this sense, printed books are basically identical and unchangeable. In contrast, manuscripts are evolving objects which can be expanded or reconfigured at any stage. So therefore, my first chapter focuses on a group of Dunhuang codices with complex codicological strata and attempts to reconstruct the continual and constant evolution of these manuscripts. Then the following chapters are devoted to three social aspects: culture, religion, and education. Each chapter examines the production and use of codices in a specific setting. As I introduced, Dunhuang received influences from many cultures. So at the same time, so manuscript also embodied a lot of Central Asia civilizations. And also I studied on the use of codices as a religious project. But then let us then for the rest of this presentation, I will specifically focus on the fourth chapter about codices and the students. Let's see. Yeah, in this chapter, I reconstruct a network of sharing and reusing learning materials and schools and temples, and explored how students engage in this network. And if you are interested in students and education in medieval Dunhuang, and I recommend two books. The first one, they are true English language studies. And the first one is Victor Meer's catalog of Dunhuang manuscript written by students. This was a description of nearly 600 manuscripts produced by students. The second one is Imre Galambo's new book about Dunhuang manuscript culture, in which there is a chapter specifically on students' manuscripts. Our knowledge of students in Dunhuang is mainly from colophons written by students. From colophons, we can know the date of the manuscript, the names of students, the place where they studied, the social status. From students' manuscripts, we can learn about what kind of tests they studied. From their handwriting, we can see how well they studied. And here I am giving an example of students' colophon. Here, this is a copy of the Xiao Jing, a classic the classic of filial piety. This is a Confucian classic treatise giving advice on filial piety. People of the Chuan, so here is the main text of the Xiao Jing, and then here is the title, and here is the colophon. And people of the Chuan either place the title, the title either at the beginning of the text or at the end of the text, or both. So in this colophon, we first see the date, copying on the 8th days of the 11 months of the Yiyou year and the third of the Tongguang reign. Yiyou and Tongguang are both like era terms through which we know the year is 925. Then we see the names of the copiers by the Lang Jun, Cao Yuansheng. The first interesting thing of this colophon is that it was written by this person, Cao Yuansheng, who came from the local ruling family of Dunhuang. He became the ruler of Dunhuang 40 years later in 939. And the term Lang Jun here shows his elite background. Material discovered in Dunhuang show that at least some of the students were members of elite or prominent clan. Then we also see Sanjie Monastery, which is a local monastery in Dunhuang. In Dunhuang, we have many colophons in which students identify themselves as belonging to particular monasteries, but not all students were studying on monasteries. The manuscript also record other locations such as prefecture and county level schools. Then we look at the physical appearance of this manuscript. We can see the main text has better handwriting than the colophon. This often occurs in students' manuscript. We may assume the main text to be part of the assignment, such as a homework, in which the quality of handwriting mattered. The colophon was not part of the excess work, so students became sloppy when they wrote the colophons. So this colophon exemplifies the general structure of student colophons. Though in practice, individual examples may vary, the student may omit some elements depending on what they consider important. The most stable items of information are the date and the student's name. The tests copied by students were relatively short and included classic, vernacular literature, poetry, and a variety of primers. Among the most frequent are the Lunyu, the Xiaojing we just mentioned, the classic of filial piety, and then Qianziwen, the thousand character classic, 太公家教 family teaching of 太公, 开蒙要训 important instruction for beginners, and 百行章 standards on the 100 conduct. So the first two are Confucian classics, and they have kind of manageable length for students to copy. And the last the last four items are primers and textbooks used in primary education to teach the alphabet, characters, and other basic subjects. The material they so the material they copied usually include a variety of cultural knowledge in a convenient and accessible manner, such as Qianziwen. The 1,000 character classics, this is a primer for teaching Chinese characters to children. It contains exactly 1,000 characters, each used only once, arranged into 215 lines of 4 characters apiece to make it easy to memorize. we can read the first 3 lines of this primer to feel how people at that time learn Chinese. So the first 4 characters are like this one means sky, this one means earth, this one means dark, and this one means yellow. So then they put those characters together to form a sentence, and then we have the sky and the earth are dark and yellow. And then the word here means the universe. Then this word is adjective vast. Then this one is desolate. So we have the sentence, the universe is vast and desolate. So in this way, children learn characters one by one, and the sentence provides a context for them to memorize the meaning of these characters. And in the third, and also we can read another line. In the third line here, we learn another 8 characters. Han, cold, Lai, arrive, Shu, heat, Wang, depart, then Qiu, autumn, Shou, harvest, Dong, winter, Cang, store. So we have the sentence, the cold arrives and the heat departs, harvest in autumn and store in winter. And for learning characters, in Dunhuang, we also have several manuscripts featuring practices of characters. On the screen, this is the book cover of one codex, and a student reuse it to practice characters. We can see lines of repeated characters. Even you do not know Chinese, I think you can still see in each line, the characters are the same. So the student was practicing these characters again and again and again, and he started another line to practice another character. Clearly, so this character also like in very childish hand. So clearly, the end was to practice the writing of individual characters. This is almost a sentence that they were written by students at lower stages of learning. Another interesting thing is that these characters follow sentence sequence. And if you look at the Qianziwen again, you can find this character follow the sequence of the Qianziwen. Follow the Qianziwen, the character I mark it with red are those appears in these character practices. Then we have another example is a part of a long scroll. There are also long repetitions of characters from Qianziwen. So this time the student only selected some of characters from the Qianziwen for doing exercises, which I mark it with red. So this character may have been difficult to this student, so he only select those characters to practice. On the screen, I am showing you another intriguing manuscript of the Qianziwen, and you can see Chinese characters here. And then next to the characters, you can see some curved strokes. Does anyone know what are these? So actually, these are Tibetan. So more precisely, these are Tibetan phonetic annotation of the Chinese characters. So what happened here is that someone used Tibetan to transliterate Chinese characters, used Tibetan to denote the pronunciation of these characters. The user of this manuscript may have been someone know Tibetan, of course, but he was not that confident with Chinese, especially the pronunciation of Chinese characters. So he used Tibetan to learn how to pronounce Chinese characters. And then as for learning the pronunciation, I can give you another example. This is a Chinese Cantonese phrase book that I just mentioned. And in fact, you cannot find any Chinese characters in this manuscript, but you can find the sound of Chinese characters. Each entry of this phrase book start with the sound of Chinese characters using bombing scripts to indicate. And then it gives the meaning in Cantonese. So this is Cantonese and the meaning is bring us wine. So it is like a language textbook for Cantonese speaker who needed to learn oral Chinese. They would have an idea of how to pronounce the sentences. These phrasebooks also include sentences one can use at a market when buying and selling things, such as bring me vegetables, bring me cucumbers, bring me gold. So different from the last example, the Qianziwen, which is used by students who was at the primary stage of learning Chinese, this manuscript is more likely to be a language handbook for travelers and merchants on the Silk Road. Going back to students. Going back to students' manuscripts, I am sharing more examples to show the students' lives in Dunhuang. On the screen is an ending page of a wide format codex. This codex contains the text, The Fragmentary Gold, which is a literary handbook gathering Mesopotamian materials which you can use for writing poems or essays. We find a colophon at the end of the text saying it was copied by a monk in 912. If you turn the page and look at the verso of the page, here is the verso of the page. We find you can see several lines of writings here, which is the handwriting is much inferior than the previous one. So it is from a different person. And this is a note left by a student named Xue Yanjun in 1924. So like 12 years later, then the monk after the monk copied this manuscript. And the note says, when Ming grew 12 leaves, that means on the 12 days of the month, on the Gui Xi month, the third month of the 2nd years of the Hongguang reign, so it's just 924. The ignorant Junior Xue Junyi from Lunan. Lunan is the place name, so it's this student's hometown, was a fish out of water and unable to understand the subtle words. Now I can only chant a 7 characters octave. The little kid was extremely diligent in study. I kept working hard and eager to be admired by others. If I recite the text as frequently as I did today, my wisdom will overflow, filled with silver and gold. I am not interested in profiting from this, but concerned about how to achieve the way. Well, the way in Chinese means kind of norms of social responsibility. A gentleman worries about the way, not poverty. What do I learn from several years of study? I learned to respect my teacher and to build my career. The junior is a fish out of water. Though I said ambitious words, I did not understand the subtleties. If someone who is intelligent see this, please do not fault me. So this is a very interesting note because you can really see what he thought after he read the literary handbook. So firstly, he called himself the ignorant junior, the little kid, which shows a very humble manner. He also find this text difficult and described himself as a fish out of water. And he was unable to understand the subtle words of the text. The poems he chant here, the poem he chant here was not necessarily composed by himself. It is possible he quoted from elsewhere, but still we can see the mentality of student at that time. If you work hard and gain success, you will be admired by others. Wisdom and knowledge are as valuable as silver and gold. We should pursue we should pursue the way, know the social responsibility, and the spiritual achievement is more important than material life. And you should also respect your teacher and learn to be an aspiring person. Another problem we see from this manuscript is that this student was using a manuscript copied by a monk. Why a monk? Then I started to search for more information about this student, and his name appeared in colophons of other manuscripts. In two colophons, he called himself as a student in Jingtu monastery. Then we know he was studying in a Buddhist monastery. Probably this monk also affiliated with this monastery, and the manuscript he copied had been kept in the temple's library. Students studying in this temple may have utilized the library collection, and this was how this student Xueyuan Jun accessed to get the learning material. So another interesting sentence from Xue's note is, if if someone who is intelligent see this, please do not fault me. This sentence appears in a couple of other colophons and is more likely to be a formula to express the humbleness. On the other hand, the use of this formula reflects a kind of common mentality that the student knew the manuscript would be read and used by someone else. So afterwards, who would read and use this manuscript? And then I am showing you another manuscript which contains this sentence. This is a codex copied by a student named Yin. We know this because it has a colophon by this person, and the colophon is dated to 978. This codex is incomplete and the end is missing. Now it only contains two texts. The first one is a story about a famous historical figure, Ji Bu. The second text is a collection of poems by Wang Fanzhi. The front cover of this codex is also filled with writing by this student in a very inferior hand. I translated some of the key sentences. Record of copying on the 21st day of the second month of the Wu Ying year, the third of the Taiping Xinguo reign by Yin. And then we have another record on the 7th day of the second month. And here you have three people here. And these people, Yin Shao, who might be Yin, who might be the student's classmates, made a brush by himself. But the brushes were of bad quality, and then we curse him. I use this brush to copy text. Those who came after me and who read this, do not fault me. And then we have another two records about his copying, his assignment. So you can see, like, from firstly, the most impressive one is the student used a poor quality brush and made by one of his classmates. And then secondly, we see a series of dates. As I mentioned earlier, this codex has a colophon dated to the 10th day of the 4th month. And then these days on the front covers are all from the 2nd month of the same year, so which is earlier than the date of the colophon. So it is highly possible that this was a record. This was a record of his previous assignment, previous homework. We can see the record of copying a volume of 文字. 文字 in Chinese means characters. And then another record of copying a volume of 记部. 记部 is a story about this historical figure. So moving back to the part of the bad quality brush, we see the sentence. Those who came after me, please do not fault me. So who would read and use this manuscript? We might find the answer in this codex. Here we have two colophons. One is by a student, again, by Inur, the same student we have just introduced. And then another colophon by a monk, dated to 983. And also actually this codex contains a lot of teaching materials. We can see two primers, and then a poem called The Lament of the Lady of Qing. Well, this is a really famous Han poetry, and even today in mainland China, we have these poems in the high school textbook. And then we have discourse between T and Y, a small essay describing the conversation between T and Y. And T and Y in this essay, they argue with each other. T said, I am better than you. Y said, I am better than you. So it's a really interesting small piece of essay. Here is like, you can see this codex was copied by a student dated in 979. And then after how many years? After 4 years, then a monk obtained this codex and left his own colophon. So then we have another example related to the phenomenon of sharing learning materials. Here is a scroll copied by a student named Wang. Here, let's look at this one. So it also contain this is a copy of the Bai Xinjiang standards on 100 conducts. So this is a primer teaching morality and ethnic and acid, teaching like children how to behave yourself. And at the end, there are several lines of colophons. So the first one is copied by a Wang Hairun student at the Jingchu Monastery, or on the 21st day of the first month of the Gencheng year, 920. Then transcribed by Deng Baozhu and Xu Anjun. So we have 3 people here. Then there's another colophon following the first colophon, copied by Deng Baozhu, student at the Jingchu Monastery on the 16 days of the first month of the Gencheng year, and also in the same year, then transcribed and used by Xu Anjun. So you can see there are 2 copied by here, and there are 3 people's names, but the manuscript was only in one hand. So what happened here actually is Wang Hairun transcribed all this information from another copy, and he not only transcribed the primer, the standards on 100 conducts, he also transcribed the colophons from the copy which he based on. There were at least 3 manuscripts involved in this process. The first copy A, was copied by Deng Baozhu on the 6 days of the first month. Then here can Xu Anjun, another student, then Xue transcribed text and the colophon by Deng from copy A. Then finally, we have this student Wang Hairun on the 12 days of the first month, like he transcribed the text from the copy B. Then Wang noted down the copy he based on copy B, and it was by noted down he based on was by courtesy of Deng and Wang. So this is how all this information pile up and finally appears at the end of the manuscript copied by Wang Hairun. So today we cannot find the copy A and copy B, but we still have copy C, and from the copy C we can reconstruct this lineage of transcribing learning material. We can also see how students share learning materials. They all studied at the Jingchu Monastery, and this is the place where this network of sharing learning material happened.
Maybe last 5 minutes to conclude.
Yeah. Yeah, yes.
Oh, very good.
Okay. So to end my seminar, I'm giving some conclusions of my research. So there was a network of sharing and reusing learning materials where students could access other student copies. Their manuscript could also be used and corrected by later comers. The anxiety of students who worried that they would be blamed for the inept handwriting and ignorance can be seen on manuscripts. Students use manuscripts copied by monks, and manuscripts copied by students were also reused by monks, indicating that one major place from which students access learning materials were Buddhist temples. Some learning material may have been kept in the monastery libraries for students who studied in monastery to use. These practices reveal the close relation between the reuse of manuscript and the education in 10th century Dunhuang. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, maybe we can come up. You can close the slides. It's great. Thank you for this very fascinating presentation. It's a very interesting topic and issue you examined in your thesis and today as well. After you finish your PhD, Jing FENG, I would highly encourage you to visit Cappadocia. You can write it down.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, Cappadocia, you can do a kind of very interesting, is that right? Maybe some other of you can.
I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, Cappadocia, I'll write it for you.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
It's somewhere close to the southern part of Turkey. It's very close to one of our fellows here. Shura can inform you, or maybe some others who are from the region can inform you a lot. Cappadocia contains a lot of caves where, similar to Dunhuang, a lot of caves where the first and second century Christians hide themselves, right? And lots of murals and in the valleys, full of caves, and the shape, the outer physical landscape of Cappadocia pretty much look like similar to the one that you have shared with us. I'm not sure if you remember. You remember once I recommended some of our students in Beijing. You remember you were TA, but I'm not sure if you remember that. I asked them to write a reflection essay on one of the films called Winter Sleep.
I have like blurred memory, but I remember the name.
Yes, Winter Sleep. Yeah, the movie is shot almost in every corner of that area, Cappadocia, in the winter time. So it's a very interesting place. You can do comparative examination of any further studies you would love to do. So just a few notes. Maybe I will give some time to our fellows here to formulate their questions or comments. You mentioned Uyghur, manuscripts found in the cave. I'm not sure. Do you remember in what alphabet or characters those manuscripts are written? Do you remember anything?
No, sorry, but I can give you like some information about the writing style. Like normally in Uyghur manuscript, if like before the 10th century, the shape of the alphabet, the letters can be more round, compacted. And then if you read the Uyghur manuscript from the Mongolian period, which is much later, then you can see those letters are of kind of sharp ending, sharp strokes, and also more stretched. So sorry, I can only give you and I could write the letter style.
Another small minor question, perhaps. do you know anything about how they studied? You shared some very interesting notes that the students wrote on the colophones of those manuscripts. But I'm just curious how they studied, how they learned those manuscripts. They read it out loud to their masters, and masters corrected them. Was there any moment of discussion? I didn't understand. This is very subtle for me. Can you explain it to me, and so on and so forth? Any information about the way they learn? Learning.
The major problem is like, because for medieval studies we only have manuscripts, and also for Dunhuang we largely based on manuscripts, and we do not have a lot of transmitted sources also about this. And so what we know can only like based on what the manuscript can tell us. And as I showed you, like we discovered the repetitive practice of characters. So this is also one of the way they learn characters, and about pronunciation, like in a kind of bilingual context, like they use Tibetan and also Cantonese pronunciation to learn Chinese characters pronunciation. But and also about the space is like, we know they have teachers, and the teacher can correct their manuscripts, maybe with red pen, but sometimes they also self-study. They use red ink to correct their own copies. So that, but we do not know how the whole system functioned, because like we only have manuscript written by students or corrected by students, but we do not have any other materials like really depicting how the school was like at that time. And we can only get some like fragmentary information. For example, I give you a note who like three students, they were together and to make a pen to copy it, made a brush to copy the manuscript, and one of students blamed him for like making a bad quality pen. So we can only have this really like, how to say, like trivial information. So I'm sorry about, so we do not have enough materials. That's the problem. So it's really hard to tell like what the manuscript want to tell us. So yeah, actually it's really good question. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thank you for your diligently listening up this lovely presentation. Wish you good luck, and have a good evening for those who are in Turkey, and have a wonderful afternoon to you in England and Sweden. I believe it's an afternoon, right? In Sweden, I believe. All right.
It's always night here.
Yeah, actually me too, almost. Yeah.
Okay. So have a good night. Okay. Bye bye.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you.